They're going to test you. Not with swords, not with fire, not with thunder. They'll test you with glances, with silences, with what they leave unsaid. You'll stand in a room that's packed with noise, but somehow the loudest thing will be the one voice that didn't speak, the voice that should have. That's how people wound each other today. Not by screaming at you, but by ignoring you. Not by attacking you head-on, but by slipping through the cracks of what you expect. And if you're not ready, if you haven't trained yourself to hold steady, they'll own you. Because let's be honest, people do bother you. You catch every change in their tone. You notice every pair of eyes that won't quite meet yours. You hear every "I'm fine" that clearly isn't. You want to be untouchable, but the truth is you feel everything. If Machiavelli were here, he'd whisper from the shadows, "Good, feel it, but don't show it." So let's start with a hard truth, one most people don't like to say out loud. Wanting to be unaffected by other people is not something that just happens. It has to be trained. It has to be built. It starts the moment you finally see how much of your peace depends on other people's approval and how dangerous that really is. Because your entire life, whether you realize it or not, has been built around this invisible audience. Every word you speak, every outfit you wear, every opinion you either share or keep quiet about, every forced laugh, they're not just your personal choices. They're part of a silent performance for a crowd you never even invited. But now you're afraid of losing them. And that's where Machiavelli comes in. See, he didn't care about virtue. He cared about control. Not just controlling other people, but controlling perception itself. In his world, survival depended on strategy, not sincerity. And to be honest, your world isn't so different. Because power today, it still goes to the ones who stay unbothered, while the rest drown in their feelings. So if you want to break this cycle, if you want to act like people never bother you, you have to first understand why they do bother you. It's not because you're weak. It's because your nervous system is wired for survival, not sovereignty. You're still out there chasing belonging. You still crave safety, connection. And there's nothing shameful about that. That's human. But in this age of hypervisibility, where every like, every comment, every delayed reply becomes a referendum on your worth, the desire to be liked has turned into a weapon against you. People don't even need to break you anymore. They just have to ignore you long enough and you'll break yourself. So here's the first shift you need to make. You cannot wait for other people to change before you find your composure. You cannot wait for the world to stop pushing your buttons before you learn restraint. Because the art of appearing unbothered is not about having no emotions. It's about mastering your response. And that starts in that tiny silent gap between the moment something happens and how you react. Let's say someone insults you. And of course, in today's world, that's rarely direct. It'll come wrapped in fake civility, a joke that cuts a little too close, a compliment that feels more like a dig, a subtle snub in a room full of smiles. How do most people react? Not always with words, but with energy, a stiffened posture, a micro-expression, that hot flush of embarrassment rising in your chest. That's when they know they got you. That's when they see they've touched something real.
But if you train yourself not to suppress it, but to observe it, then you start to gain power. You don't react. You don't flinch. You don't shrink. You feel the sting, but you let it burn without showing it. And that control, that's your signal. This one cannot be moved so easily. Machiavelli understood this deeply. He who angers you controls you, but it goes even further. He who confuses you, who makes you doubt your own worth, who messes with how you see yourself, that person holds your peace hostage. So what's the answer? It's not arrogance. It's not pretending you're above it all. People can smell that fake superiority a mile away. No, the answer is something quieter. It's detachment. It's making a silent agreement with yourself. You will not accept every emotional invitation thrown your way. Because most of those provocations are exactly that. Invitations to collapse, to explain yourself, to defend your worth. And the second you do that, the second you start defending your existence, you've already lost. So you train yourself in the small things. When someone stares at you a bit too long, don't assume they're judging. When someone leaves your text unseen, don't spiral. When someone outshines you in a conversation, don't chase the spotlight. Let it happen. Let the ego flare and don't feed it. That's how you build this muscle of acting unbothered, not as a performance, but as real psychological strength. Because eventually you won't be acting anymore. You'll actually feel the quiet. You'll sense the distance between yourself and all that chaos. And that is the moment the real shift happens. That's when the person who used to control your moods suddenly becomes just a character in your past. That's when compliments stop feeling like an addiction. That's when criticisms stop piercing you. That's when silence becomes your weapon instead of your punishment. This isn't about turning cold. It's about becoming aware of how much of your self-worth you are outsourcing to other people. How often you let your joy be held hostage by someone else's opinion. How deeply you craved being seen because you hadn't truly seen yourself yet. And that's where it starts. With a kind of brutal honesty, asking yourself, who am I performing for? Strip off the mask, shut down the echo chamber, push aside the imaginary spectators, and stand there in the terrifying exposed light of being just you. That's when you'll finally be free to stop performing. That's when you'll act instead of react. That's when you'll truly understand what Machiavelli meant by, it is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. But this is just the beginning, because this isn't only about surviving other people, it's about mastering yourself. There are layers buried inside you, emotions you've shoved down, roles you've been playing, masks you've worn for so long you almost believe they're skin. We're going to peel those layers back, one by one, until the only person left is the one who no longer needs to appear powerful because they already are.
Before we go any further, let's get real for a second. If this is hitting home for you, if you've ever felt that tension between performing and actually being at peace, you're not alone. And if you're here listening, it probably means you're ready to dig deeper. Let's rewind for a minute. Think about where all this started. It usually doesn't start with huge trauma or some massive betrayal. It starts way earlier and way more subtle than that. It starts in childhood. When you were young, you learned fast which version of yourself got rewarded, which tone of voice earned praise, which silence kept you out of trouble, which tears would be ignored. Little by little, you edited yourself. You shifted. You sanded down the sharp edges of who you really were just so you could be accepted. And it worked. You survived. But there was a price. Every single time you changed yourself to make other people comfortable, you drifted just a little bit further from your truth. And that truth, raw, honest, unpolished, became something you almost feared, because that truth was risky.
that truth could be rejected. Fast forward to your adult life. You're no longer living under your parents' rules. You're not a child anymore. But the old programming is still running. Now, instead of parents or teachers, it's society. It's your friends. It's strangers on the internet. It's people you don't even know holding up this silent mirror asking you, do you still want to belong? Then keep performing. And so most people go through life haunted by this fear of being disliked, of being disapproved of. Not consciously maybe, but you can feel it in the way you second-guess yourself before you speak. You can feel it in the nervous laugh you do at someone's joke that wasn't funny. You can feel it in the micro-panic when a text goes unanswered.
This is not you being too sensitive. It's not overthinking. It's something deeper, something old. It's ancestral fear wearing a modern disguise. Machiavelli wouldn't have pitied you for this. He would have studied you, because to him, human nature wasn't a spiritual mystery, it was a predictable formula. People want safety. People want to belong. People want to win, but they don't want to look like they're trying too hard. And all of that, it makes them easy to manipulate. So let me ask you something hard. Have you become easy to manipulate? Do you change your values when you're around stronger personalities? Do you downplay your wins so you don't make other people uncomfortable? Do you over-explain your boundaries just to look more reasonable? If so, you're not alone, but you're also not free. And that's exactly what we're here to change. You have to see the invisible contract you signed with the world, the one that says, I will shrink so you won't abandon me. Rip it up. Because the more you shapeshift to avoid rejection, the more you become a ghost in your own story, present but not real, loved but not known, safe but not sovereign. To break out of this performance trap, to really act like people never bother you, you have to step through a kind of crucible, not a fire, but of discomfort. You have to learn to let people misunderstand you. You have to let them get it wrong about you. You have to let them whisper, misjudge, distort, and stay calm anyway.
Because the need to correct everyone is just your ego begging to be validated. That urge to explain yourself over and over, it's not confidence, it's fear dressed up as clarity. Real composure doesn't explain, it doesn't plead, it doesn't rush to fix other people's ideas. It observes, it waits, it lets time reveal the truth. That's the secret Machiavelli buried inside his brutal philosophy. Silence is the loudest kind of power, but not passive silence, strategic silence, the kind that rattles people, the kind that makes them show their hand before you ever move a piece. Let's go deeper. Most people are living in a constant state of emotional reactivity. Someone criticizes you, you defend. Someone ghosts you, you chase. Someone provokes you, you attack. It's a loop that keeps you dependent on their behavior to regulate your own emotional weather. But what if you didn't? What if someone ignored your message for a day, and instead of spiraling, you got sharper? What if someone threw shade at you, and instead of clapping back, you smiled? What if someone tried to provoke you, and instead of taking the bait, you leaned into stillness? Not to be fake, not to manipulate, but because you are done letting other people decide how you feel. This isn't about being numb, it's about no longer leaking, no longer bleeding out every time someone pokes your insecurities. It's about becoming emotionally bulletproof, not because you're disconnected, but because you're grounded. And grounded people, they scare manipulators to death. Grounded people can't be baited. They don't need applause. They don't shrink when others puff up.
They don't orbit around unpredictable moods. They observe, they choose, and that, right there, is the essence of power. Let's talk about energy. In any room, in any relationship, there's always a hidden currency being traded. Attention, validation, deference, power. Most people give it away for free through nervous giggles, endless texting, apologizing too much, needing to be liked. But Machiavelli would have told you, never give what you haven't first priced. Your energy is not free. Your attention is not free. Your explanations are not free. Start rationing it. Watch how fast people start respecting it. Not everyone will like it, and that's fine, because the goal is not to be liked. The goal is to be clear. And clear people, they're magnetic because they're rare. Speak less, listen more. Not to jump in with your opinion, but to truly study what's happening.
Watch how people reveal themselves when you don't rush to fill the silence. Watch how their motives, their insecurities, their agendas start to leak out. The more you listen, the more power you gain. The more you react, the more power you lose. It sounds simple, but it's anything but easy, especially if you've built your identity around being agreeable, the peacemaker, the one who makes sure no one feels uncomfortable. But here's the truth that Machiavelli understood, and most people never want to admit. Being nice is not the same as being good. Sometimes being good means setting fire to illusions. Sometimes being good means saying no without apology. Sometimes being good means walking away without a grand explanation. And if that bothers people, let it. That's the point. To really act like people never bother you, you have to let them try and watch them fail. You have to let them play their games while you refuse to join. You have to let their opinions pass right through you. Not because they don't sting, but because you have chosen to value your peace more than your performance. This is not a costume. This is a transformation. You are not here to earn love by editing yourself anymore. You are not here to beg for peace by sacrificing your boundaries anymore. You are not here to defend your worth with endless explanations anymore. You are here to observe the game and then win it by refusing to play.
But here's the thing. The journey doesn't stop there. Because once you reclaim that energy, once you become the person who's no longer so easily moved, the world will test you even harder. The silence around you will get louder. The bait people throw at you will get sweeter. And that, right there, is where the real transformation begins. At first, your silence will feel like power. You'll sit in rooms where you used to perform, but now you'll stay still, deliberate, measured. You'll talk less. You'll watch more. And suddenly, you'll notice all the subtle shifts in power you never caught before because you were too busy chasing approval. People will lean in when you lean out. They will chase what no longer chases them back. You will look untouchable, or so it seems. But that isn't the end of the path. It's only the beginning. Because eventually, something deeper will rise, something quieter than silence, heavier than composure. Loneliness. Not the kind that begs for company, the kind that creeps in when you realize just how much of your identity was built around being needed, liked, included. You thought the goal was to not be bothered by people, but now you see how much of who you were was shaped by being bothered. So who are you, really, when no one reacts to you? Who are you when the world no longer pulls at your emotions? Who are you when praise doesn't thrill you and rejection doesn't gut you? That is the psychological void most people never reach, because it's in that void, in that stillness, where the real work begins. You are no longer dancing for the crowd. Now you have to face the only person you can't impress, can't manipulate, can't lie to, yourself.
And in that moment, the silence you once wore as armor turns into a mirror. You see all the ways you abandon yourself just to keep the peace. You see the roles you played so people would like you. You see the fake laughter, the nodding, the chameleon behavior. You see all the tiny betrayals, the times you said yes when everything inside you was screaming no. And then comes the shame. Not the loud, punishing kind, the surgical kind. The kind that shows you the person who bothered you most was never them. It was you. You bothered yourself every time you ignored your gut. You bothered yourself every time you lowered your standards. You bothered yourself every time you performed for love you didn't even respect. And that's the moment you begin the final descent, not into numbness, not into isolation, but into authenticity. This is where Machiavelli's philosophy transforms into your psychology. He never asked you to be cold. He asked you to be calculated. And now you see why. Because emotions left unmanaged will make you someone's puppet. But emotions you have mastered will make you sovereign. From that place, you start to rebuild, not as a performance, not to look strong, but to actually be unshaken. You start saying what you mean, not to shock people, but to set yourself free. You start holding back your energy, not to punish, but to protect. You let people misunderstand you, not because you enjoy it, but because you don't fear it anymore. You learn that clarity will cost you some connections, and you're willing to pay. You learn that peace will put distance between you and some people, and you stop apologizing for it. You learn that some people were never bothered by you. They were threatened by what you might become. And when you stopped shrinking, they stepped away. Let them.
Because that's when the final transformation happens. You no longer act like people never bother you. You simply aren't available for that energy anymore. Not because you think you're better, but because you've outgrown the addiction to reacting. Now you respond to life, not to people. You listen to your intuition, not your insecurities. You move with presence, not performance. And something amazing happens. The world starts to mirror your stillness. People treat you with the same respect you treat yourself. Conversations slow down. Conflicts dissolve before they even spark. You're not unbothered because you're untouchable. You're unbothered because you're undisturbed by who they are and who you're not. So if someone tries to provoke you, you might smile. Not because it doesn't sting, but because you know they have no idea how deeply you've already faced your own darkness. And no one can touch a person who has sat with their own shadow and survived it. That is your final test. To walk through a world built to distract you, to provoke you, to lure you into explaining yourself, and still choose silence. Not as a way to hide, but as a throne. So the next time someone throws shade your way, remember this. Shadows only show up when something is already standing in the light. The next time someone tries to dismiss your worth, remember you don't need their permission slip. The next time someone tries to bait the old version of you, remember that version is long buried. Because now you are a sovereign, a presence, A calm force that is no longer here to be liked, no longer here to react. You're here to move with clarity. And only those who can understand your silence are worth hearing. You don't become powerful by dominating other people. You become powerful by no longer needing to prove that you are. Let them talk. Let them judge. Let them misunderstand. Because the moment you no longer feel the urge to fix their perception is the moment you finally, fully own yourself.